Warning, the following podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised. If you are sensitive to any content or subject matter in films, I recommend looking up this film on doesthedogdie.com. It is a user-based database of extensive content warnings for pretty much every film you can think of. It basically gives you a heads up to all the potentially triggering topics a movie might have. Check it out and take care of yourself. Welcome back to We Creeps. I'm your host, Evan Exhumed. And just like before, every week I summarize and review a different horror film for people who are a little too squeamish or easily spooked to watch them, but still really enjoy the plot and often end up looking them up on Wikipedia or Googling the ending explained. We, of course, welcome horror movie fans all the same. I just want to say thanks for being here because you do make a difference in my life. Maybe not other people's lives, but you do make a difference in my life. I am extremely excited for this episode because today we will be covering Evil Dead Rise, a recent release, came out this year, and holy shit, was it fucking good. I mean, it's probably, I would say, my favorite Evil Dead movie at this point. I mean, it was just such a banger. Evil Dead Rise 2023 is directed by Lee Cronin and written by Lee Cronin. It stars Alyssa Sutherland, Lily Sullivan, Gabrielle Eccles, Nell Fisher, Anna Marie Thomas, Morgan Davies, and Marabi Pease. I mean, really, what else can I say about this film except that it's absolutely perfect? I went to the theater with one of my good friends, and we were just on the edge of our seats, freaking out because there's just so much that happens, and it pays homage to the original Evil Deads. It innovates. It, has great representation. I mean, there's just so much to this movie that I just fucking love, and I cannot wait to share it with you. It's also extremely gory and pretty brutal, so I will say that this is a good episode for you to listen to if you are too squeamish, because it's a lot, and they get pretty creative, especially with the cheese grater. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started on this fantastic horror thriller movie, Evil Dead Rise. First thing we start with is an immaculate homage to the original Evil Deads with a first-person shot just kind of going through this little creek lake area, and then the camera then ends up flying up to a character, it's a young woman, and this kind of dude bro there as well. The camera was actually a drone, so it's a nice little modern twist on the original camera work that is an homage to the original Evil Dead. So the woman's name is Teresa. She's probably about in her 20s, and she is friends with a woman named Jessica, and the guy is her boyfriend, Jessica's boyfriend. So I guess Jessica's not feeling very well, so Teresa goes back to the cabin that they're staying at, which is a super dope, like, triangle-looking thing. I don't know, it's a very cool architecture, but she ends up going to check on her. So Jessica's feeling still pretty sick, so Teresa sits down in a little chair and begins to read Wuthering Heights, I don't know what the fuck it's called. But as she's reading it, Jessica begins to speak what is in the book. So either she memorized it or there's something severely wrong here. Turns out Jessica has been infected with the Deadite evil or whatever it is. And so she starts to look pretty damn bad. Jessica begins to convulse and foaming at the mouth or something. And as Teresa is trying to take care of her, she goes full Deadite, starts to choke Teresa, and then rips off the top of her scalp by her ponytail. Now we're looking at Caleb, the jockey guy with the drone, and he's just chilling, pissing in the lake. And all of a sudden, Jessica comes walking up behind him, holding Teresa's scalp. So Caleb is like, babe, you're looking pretty bad. What's going on here? And Jessica, full Deadite mode, grabs the drone and just shoves it in her face, cutting up her face. And then she jumps into the water. And Caleb, being a decent boyfriend, I guess, jumps in the water to try to save her. However, she fucks him up in the water and then throws his head onto the dock. And then suddenly this bitch is just floating up into the air like Jesus. And behind her is the title card, Evil Dead Rise. And it is one of the coolest opening sequences that I've ever seen in a horror film. I mean, it is just so fucking aesthetic. I lost it in the theaters. It was just so fucking cool. So now we're hit with a little subtext that says 1 day earlier. So one thing that's really interesting about this is that the filmmaker is letting us know that whatever evil entity that we're going to be dealing with in this movie has already won, because this is a day earlier. So all of the events of the movie are a day earlier, and the evil eventually escapes, I guess, and infects other people, and we don't know what happens after that. So to me, that is such a really great tool to use in a horror movie, to just let the audience know what kind of movie this is going to be. So this is where we're introduced to our main protagonist, Beth. She is sitting on a toilet in a very grungy, graffitied, punk, sort of concert venue bathroom, and it appears that she is pregnant. So she doesn't look too happy about that. So I'm guessing it was unwanted. I believe that she is a guitar technician or musical technician for a punk band or something. So she is very, very talented in terms of stage management and just technical prowess. However, we do see her landing in LA, jumping out of a taxi to a very large, sort of rundown looking apartment building. It seems that she is going to visit her family, with her sister specifically and her kids. So we've got a full cast here, so bear with me. We've got first the cool sister mom, Ellie. She's tattooed. She's working on an old style tattoo gun. She's an artist. We've got Bridget, who's kind of like the middle child, feminist, protesting kid. We've got Cassie, who is the youngest. She's probably about 10. And then we have Danny, who is this sort of thin 18-year-old boy who really likes to DJ and is kind of shitty at it. Some people think the music that he was, DJing in the apartment was good. I didn't, but that's just me. I think a really cool thing as well is that Danny specifically is a trans man, which, it's just cool to see representation in any films, but horror especially. The family are just kind of all in their apartment doing their own thing. We also get introduced to a couple of the neighbors who are kind of into Bridget. The littlest one, which is about, I'd say 8 to 10 years old, is Scott. And then we have kind of the teenager about the same age as her, 16, named Jake. So they knock on the apartment door kind of covered in Cheeto dust. And, she sort of rebukes them immediately, and so that's kind of our introduction to those neighbor characters. Beth makes her way to the apartment door, greets her sister, comes on in, and gets settled with her nieces and nephew. Cassie, the littlest one, likes to cut up dolls and things and make creations, so she creates a staff with a baby doll head on it and calls it Staffany. The reason I mention this is because Staffany will come up later. The whole family is sitting at the table. Beth is being the cool aunt and giving gifts and stuff. And she pulls out a giant mug and is like, hey, I got this for your dad. And so Ellie is like, hey, Danny, take the kids to go pick up pizza. Me and Beth need to talk. So unfortunately, Ellie and her husband are not doing so well. Turns out the dad kind of walked out on them, believes in co-parenting from afar and not giving any child support. So things are looking pretty bad for Ellie's marriage. Beth is like, why didn't you call me? And Ellie is like, I did multiple times. So this kind of gives the impression that Beth is not really, I don't know, a good sister. Like she's kind of absent, kind of doing her own thing, which makes sense because she's, a guitar technician. So she kind of goes wherever the music is. It also feels like Ellie has sort of always played the motherly role between the two sisters. So Ellie is pretty frustrated with Beth. As the kids are coming back with the pizza, they're walking in the parking garage of the apartment and a earthquake occurs, which is pretty normal for Los Angeles, California. That's where I grew up. Earthquakes are pretty whatever, but this is a pretty significant one. So everyone is a little scared, but things seem okay. However, there is a giant fucking crack in the pavement of the parking structure. And, when you see a giant hole in the floor after a major earthquake, the first thing you probably think to do is to avoid going into the earth and exploring that. But Danny, our DJ, is a special kind of person and decides to jump down into the hole after a major earthquake to explore what could be under the apartment complex, which is going to be torn down soon because it's essentially condemned. So Danny is really our big brain MVP of the film. So in the hole, there's like a vault and some shelves and some paperwork and things. And Danny finds a box and opens the box and finds some miscellaneous vinyls and is like, yo, I bet I could use these for like a remix. And so Danny takes them and thinks nothing of it. But Danny, I will tell you now, is the reason that all of the bad things in this movie happen. And while Danny is very cute and cool, and I love the representation, Danny is the biggest fucking idiot in this entire movie. And I will never forgive him for being the catalyst that fucks everything up in the world. So yeah, after finding his hip cool records, he also finds a tomb and then opens the tomb and finds the goddamn Necronomicon number 3 and fucking pulls it out and is just like, I'm just going to throw this in my bag and just, climbs out of the pit, just acts like nothing bad has happened. And I mean, this thing just looks so fucking evil. It's just like, God, it's 2023. We should know which things to avoid here. The book was even covered in like cockroaches and beetles and shit. And it has teeth. Like, what are we doing here, kid? He takes it. So now we're back at the top of the apartment with Beth and Ellie. They also meet 2 other neighbors. We've got an old, gruff-looking guy named Mr. Fonda, and we have a sexy motherfucker named Gabriel. So the family all reunites and is like, hey, are you okay? There was an earthquake, blah, blah, blah. And everything seems fine, but they go back into their apartment and everything seems normal for now. The kids apologize to the mom that they dropped the pizza, and Ellie is like, I care so much more about you than pizza. So, I mean, there's just so many things here that is showing that Ellie is a really fucking good mom, which makes the rest of this movie really sad and upsetting, but kind of, in a fun way. So Danny and Bridget check out the book in Danny's room. And, there's giant fucking teeth on it and they can't open it. But as Danny tries to get it open, he nicks himself on the teeth and the blood causes the book to open. And inside, it's the Necronomicon. So there's pictures of people being flailed and, quartered and their skin ripped off and just terrible things and, all made of human skin or something. And, Bridget, being the only rational person who has been exposed to this, says, hey, maybe you should put that back. This is pretty fucked up. And, Danny's like, nah, it's fine. I'm cool and a DJ. And so he starts to play the records that he found as well. Fun little trivia. The voice of the priest that is played on these vinyls is actually voiced by Bruce Campbell. So that's his little cameo. Anyway, the vinyls begin to talk about the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, and how it's super evil and basically, it can do a lot of fucked up stuff. And, Danny's like, maybe I should stop playing this, but the record keeps playing itself because it's too fucking late. And we go back to that first-person camera view flying through the air, and we see Ellie taking some stuff to the car because they are planning on moving. And as she's going into the elevator, she gets, this evil entity goes inside of her and throws her up onto the elevator ceiling. And the elevator starts going up and shit starts to break. And yeah, she just falls on the floor and is now infected with the Deadite evil. Super fun. As she is trapped in the elevator, the lights start flashing. And then the cords that are part of the structure of the elevator wrap around her, which is a nice another homage to the original Evil Dead with the whole tree rape scene. If you know, you know. But instead of being raped, she's just, sort of pulled and yanked by the elevator cords, and, parts of her body are broken and she screams and she's a goner. There's no, I'm going to tell you right now, she's not coming back from this. People who are infected typically with the Deadite curse, evil, never come back. So Ellie's a goner at this point. The power suddenly goes out in the whole apartment complex. So the kids and Beth, start lighting candles and stuff. And Mommy Dearest comes back into the apartment looking all fucked up. And then she starts to make some breakfast. She's just throwing eggs into the pan, and some of the eggs are bloody, and she's just looking all kinds of fucked up. Beth and the kids are like, Ellie, you're looking kind of fucked up. You all right? And Ellie begins to talk about how she's been fantasizing about cutting up and ripping out their body parts and all sorts of weird, not very motherly things. Then all of a sudden, Ellie starts crawling at them, and her backs and bones and shit start cracking all over the place. And then she pukes up what is probably, a gallon or so of some very suspicious looking liquid, to be honest with you, to be completely transparent and to be real with you, because I feel like this is a safe space. It looked like she straight up vomited a gallon of semen. And it's just all over the floor. And so Danny and Beth, grab her and try to take her to the hospital, of course, but the elevator is broken from fucking up Ellie earlier. So they are trapped in their apartment with this deadite mommy. Sadly, Ellie dies, or seems to be dead, and they place her in her bed. Two of the neighbors come over, the sexy one and the older gruff one, Gabriel and Mr. Fonda specifically. So Beth and the two neighbors try to figure out a way to get out of the apartment. The stairs have been destroyed by the earthquake. Like I said, the building is really fucked up. I guess there's one apartment that's like blocked off, but it has a fire escape that they can go down. So that's sort of their plan of action. Ellie suddenly bursts back to life and she is burning up. She's on fire. She is very feverish. So they throw her in a cold bath and the water begins to boil and everyone's sort of freaking out. And then suddenly Ellie jumps out of the water and is now on the ceiling like Spider-Man 1 when he first discovers his power. She's like in the corner, Spider-Man, and she starts to scream at them like a demon. Then the kids look at Mom, who has fallen back into the bathtub, and they're like, Mom, are you okay? And evil Mom, Ellie, is like, Mommy's with the maggots now, and I just want to be, again, transparent about how I felt about this scene. It awakened something in me. And let's just say, I hope that I get to be maggots because I want to be with Mommy right now. So Ellie charges after the kids and Beth, and she ends up picking up a piece of broken glass and stabs Beth through the fucking hand, which looks really painful, and I'm sure it is. Then Bridget tries to distract Mommy and tells her to stop. However, Mommy ends up jumping her and grabbing the tattoo gun that she was working on earlier in the movie, and she shoves it into her fucking scalp, thus filling it with blood, and then tattoos Bridget, thus infecting her with the deadite curse evil entity thing. Danny comes running to the rescue and fucking slam Ellie with a chair, knocking her into the next room. It's a very strong young man. And as Ellie gets back up and is about to attack the next person, the neighbors come in, and then she charges for the neighbors, specifically Sexy Gabriel. So Sexy Gabriel gets attacked by Ellie, and she ends up biting out his eyeball, and then she spits the eyeball out that ends up going towards the kind of losery Cheeto boy, Jake. The eyeball flies all the way into his throat, choking him. Beth and the kids end up bolting the door shut with a bunch of locks and shove like a dresser in front of it. And as they're looking through the peephole, they can see Ellie just going full rampage mode, killing the sexy neighbor Gabriel, killing the little boy Scott, which is also a really good indicator that anyone can die in this movie. In horror movies, when you're killing kids, nobody is safe. And that's, I really like that because it's more realistic. I know that's a kind of a more of a controversial thing for a lot of people, but fuck them kids. It's just a ballsy move, I would say. And I think it's handled pretty well because, the littlest kid who gets killed, Scott, he doesn't, he gets thrown into a wall basically. And there's not much torture or anything. So that I liked. Suddenly, Mr. Fonda, the older neighbor, comes out with his fucking shotgun and shotguns the shit out of Ellie. So maybe there's hope, but probably not. Bridget confronts Danny and is like, yo, this shit is your fault. And go off, Bridget, because it is fucking Danny's fault. But Bridget and Danny show Beth what is the cause of all this and show the Necronomicon and the records and stuff. And so Beth gets a little summary of that. As Danny and Beth are looking at the book, Bridget begins to experience the deadite symptoms. The cut on her face begins to spread. She starts to puke maggots. She's going full. She's going to be changing. She's going to be dying. Meanwhile, Cassie, the littlest one, is worried about her mom, so she approaches the door and looks through the hole, and Ellie, Deadite Ellie, is able to convince Cassie to open the door a little bit, which, Ellie sticks her arm through and tries to kill her, and thankfully, Danny comes to the rescue and pushes the door shut and saves Cassie. I will say, in Danny's defense, even though Danny fucked everything up and is the whole cause of this movie, he does do quite a bit of work to try to make up for that, but, still not enough to make up for the fact that, everything is his fault. Beth then tells Danny and Cassie to go to the bedroom and just hide out and relax. And Beth ends up going to the kitchen to find Bridget, who is fully transformed. And this bitch is eating glass. So, yeah, she's just chewing glass, swallowing it. It's coming out her throat. Not looking good for Bridget. Bridget then begins to attack Beth. And as Beth is crawling away, Bridget grabs a cheese grater and cheese grates Bridget's calf as she's crawling away, which is extremely creative. I've never seen a cheese grater used in horror, but I'm always afraid of shredding myself when I'm shredding cheese. So I thought that was a very clever use of something that we all kind of think about when we're shredding things. So Danny comes in again and helps Beth fend off Bridget. Bridget then chases Danny back to Cassie's room. And then Cassie ends up stabbing Bridget through the face, through the mouth, with Stephanie. Just totally impales her face. And this temporarily, I'm assuming, kills Bridget. She pulls out the staff and, falls over. Danny and Beth decide to listen to the final vinyl, which, might provide some sort of clue as to what they can do. So Beth puts on headphones and wires up like a battery with her magical guitar technician skills because the power is still out. And she listens to the final recording, which basically says, this book's a mistake. There's nothing you can do. Everyone who interacted with it became a deadite, and the priest who is speaking and recording these vinyls had to murder essentially everyone in his parish. He had to cut them up, chop their heads off, whatever, in order to stop them. But there's really nothing you can do otherwise. As she's listening to this, evil mommy Ellie goes through the ventilation system to get back into the apartment, and Bridget comes back to life and begins to attack Danny and stabs Danny through the arm and also vomits blood all up in his mouth, likely infecting him. Ellie ends up sneaking up behind Bridget and surprising her, Spider-Man style, and she then startles Beth. Beth backs away. And then Ellie has a really cool trick where she puts her nail on the record, and then the music, or the recording rather, comes out of her mouth and finishes the priest's warnings, which I thought was pretty neat. Ellie attacks Beth. There's a bit of a struggle. Danny unfortunately dies. Cassie, however, is hiding and throws a pair of scissors at Beth, and Beth is able to stab Ellie in the nose to the brain, incapacitating her temporarily. Beth grabs Cassie and begins to leave the apartment and goes back to the main floor and tries to find a way out. They try to go through the door that leads to the fire escape, but it's still locked. So Beth picks up the shotgun that was left by their old neighbor, loads it up, and as she's about to shoot the lock on that door, Ellie comes flying in, looking real scary, and she then fires the shotgun blast, pushing Ellie, Demon Mommy, away. Suddenly, all the neighbors, the kids, everybody who was killed is now back alive, and they're a deadite. They all start screaming, "Dead by Dawn," which is a nice little reference to the older movies. And Cassie and Beth run into the elevator, which is apparently working now, and they shut it and begin to go down to the parking garage. As the elevator is going down, it suddenly fills up with blood for some reason. I'm not sure how the Deadites manifested that much blood randomly to fill an entire elevator, but we're going to suspend our disbelief because we've already seen quite a bit of interesting things happening in this movie. While the elevator is filling up with blood, all of the Deadites begin to form into a giant boss battle Deadite, like something from Elden Ring, or, like a Rat King, if you're familiar with those. It's pretty gross, but it's very creative. Finally, the elevator reaches the ground floor and explodes with blood. A very, very nice homage to the film The Shining. If you remember that film, there is also an elevator that explodes blood. Cassie and Beth are able to make it to the garage and jump into the car. However, the Deadites are on their tail. Just as they're about to peel out of there, the car wheel gets stuck in one of the cracks from the earthquake, and the giant evil Deadite monster thing is coming at them. So they jump out of the car and hide in front of it away, leaving the doors open as the Deadite kind of looks for them. They open the garage gate door and make a run for it. They tried to slide under it, but unfortunately the Deadite grabs Cassie and then throws her into the storage area of one of those wood chipper things, like not the wood chipper itself, but in the truck part that stores all the like debris after it's shredded up. So she's thrown in there, and the Deadite begins to come at her while Beth frantically tries to get back into the parking garage. The Deadite monster picks up a chainsaw in the back of this little, truck thing and starts to come at Cassie with it. But Beth gets there in just the nick of time and shotguns the fuck out of that beast. The Deadite, however, throws the chainsaw at Beth, hitting her shotgun and causing her to fall over, dropping her shotgun. So the Deadite then pulls Beth and starts the wood chipper and begins to pull her into it. Thankfully, Cassie is able to stop it, and Beth is able to escape and quickly grab the chainsaw, and she is ready to fuck some shit up. So she charges with that chainsaw and tells Cassie to turn on the wood chipper, and she uses the chainsaw to push the Deadite monster hybrid thing into the fucking wood chipper and just completely shreds it, exploding all of the body parts and blood just out of that wood chipper in a very satisfying conclusion, in my opinion. Beth and Cassie, both having survived this traumatic, life-changing experience, leave the apartment together, Beth holding the chainsaw just in case. Sad little ending here. We see the camera move back to the car, and we see on the car keys a keychain of everyone at like Disneyland or something riding one of those fun rides that takes your picture, really kind of hammering down just what a beautiful family we lost in this film. So even though this film is so badass, fuck, is it sad, because like, again, Ellie was an amazing mother and the family was very healthy. So while I do love this movie, it does still make me a little sad because it was an amazing family that we lost. We then flash to the next day. Remember, this all was happening a day prior from the cabin sequence. And we see Jessica, the woman who is possessed at the very beginning of the film. Apparently, I guess she didn't notice anything that happened yesterday. I don't know. And so she goes down to the parking garage and sees all the carnage and is really freaked out by it. And then the demonic Deadite entity spirit thing, the first person camera, just flies into her and she screams. And then the movie ends. Really, really solidifying that even though Beth and Cassie escaped, evil still won that day. So that was Evil Dead Rise 2023. Holy shit, what a fun ride. If you can stomach it, I do really recommend watching this, but it is pretty brutal. They kill kids, there's a cheese grater, there's a lot going on here. So if you're a bit more squeamish, I would avoid this one. But if you're brave, this is a really good movie and probably one of the best in the franchise of Evil Dead. I think my ranking is Evil Dead Rise, Evil Dead 2013, Army of Darkness are tied for that second spot. Then we have Evil Dead 2 and then Evil Dead 1. That's my ranking. I don't know if that's common or popular or whatever, but that's how I feel about it. Again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of We Creeps. If you'd like to support the show, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr. I have just about everything. Don't forget to check me out on Patreon if you'd like to support the show directly. I also have merch. We have We Creeps logo t-shirts and Stay Spooky Out There t-shirts, which you can find on TeePublic. All of these links can be found on WeCreeps.com. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful start to your week. Cherish your families. Keep an eye on your weird DJ-obsessed siblings because they might just jump into a pit and find a book of evil incarnate. So be on guard, and also remember to stay spooky out there.